Back to where we were before the break. Look, I mentioned the one-day comp in the context of McSweeney's 100 and Smith's half-century and New South Wales having a big win over the Vicks. WA's collapse stood out as well. I mean, there's been quite a lot going on in this tournament. Sam Elliott taking 7 for 12 a few weeks ago against Tasmania for Victoria. Well, here, WA were bowled out at the Wacker, no less. They've won the last 3 of these trophies on the trot for 53 after an 8 for 1 collapse, courtesy of Bo Webster, Billy Stanlake, and the wider Tasmanian side. I checked with Andrew Sampson. That's the worst collapse ever in List A history. The worst before it was 8 for 4. So from 52 for 2, they only added one more run, and that was a sundry. That was a wide. So no further runs off the bat from 2 down. Quite a dramatic collapse at that, and some high-quality Australian cricketers in that Aussie lineup, in that West Aussie lineup too. Bo Webster was the man doing the damage. He's a bit of a dual threat there, bowling seam up and taking wickets here, but also able to turn his hand to off spin, Tony Gregg-esque, if you like, or Funky Miller or something like that. I wonder whether he might be given all the runs he's been making as well, whether he might be a bit of an outside chance for Sri Lanka if they're looking for someone to, again, using that Colin Miller example, someone who theoretically could bowl the perfunctory 4 or 5 overs with the new ball and then not be needed again, especially in the absence of Cameron Green, who won't be able to play that role. I don't know. I wonder whether Webster might be a horse for a course there in Gaul.
Yeah, because you'd expect them to play 3 spinners like they did last year. And someone like that, like Bo Webster, would be gold at number 6. But yeah, doesn't it feel like Australia is super blessed currently, Adam, in terms of all-rounders, both batting and bowling? Well, you spoke of Bo Webster. There's Aaron Hardy, who's played quite a bit of white ball cricket of late. You can spread that web further to, say, Fergus O'Neill, who's still young. They started taking the new ball. I saw him make his debut a couple of years ago. Chris Rogers said, watch out for this boy. And here we are, he's already made it to the Australia A squad. There's Nathan McAndrew as well, who's always impressive. He's after Michael Neser, probably he's my second favorite domestic cricketer in the country. And so I think it's just Australia are really spoiled in terms of that. And there's another young spinning all-rounder who I'm looking forward to seeing in the one-day series, Cooper Conley, who's also going to play for Australia A. So, it's, I think all-rounders come in phases, don't they? But suddenly it feels like, Australia are blessed at a time when, they are bemoaning having lost Cam Green for the summer.
Connolly's the one player who'll be with Australia A and then going to play in the Aussie white ball stuff. So we've got the T20 squad that was named yesterday, which was interesting on a number of fronts, not least the fact that there's no captain, as far as I can tell. I'm not sure if that's something that's to be announced later or whether they, by definition, it would need to be, but ordinarily it would be noted, and that was written up as a news point by Cricinfo and others. But yeah, the white ball series against Pakistan, the first one-dayer, is at the G early next week. It's kind of perfect timing and not perfect timing, depending on how you see it. Like Inglis, for example, who is very much part of the white ball group, he doesn't get the chance to play another red ball game, having rattled off 200s. Now, I'm not saying that Inglis would have found his way into the test squad. I think Bailey during the week was saying that Inglis wasn't being considered as the opener. He'd spoken to him about it, and that wasn't on the radar, despite what Greg Chipp had said last week, suggesting that Inglis would do a perfectly suitable job if given the opportunity. But yeah, that T20 squad is decidedly, well, it's not inexperienced, that's the wrong term, but the big 3 quicks aren't there, which always stands out because they'll be playing in the one-day stuff and readying themselves for the first test match. But, Glenn Maxwell, of course, is back there. Marcus Stoinis and Adam Zampa, 2 mainstays of that side in recent years. Jake Fraser-McGurk, who they're hoping will come on in leaps and bounds ahead of the Champions Trophy. Tim David likewise. Xavier Bartlett, who started his international career so splendidly at the MCG last year. Aaron Hardy, who you mentioned before. Sean Abbott, who picked up a fifer for New South Wales last week. Spencer Johnson, who again was injured playing short-form cricket last year, and they really want to be part of that next generation when, I guess when Mitchell Stark's no longer, whenever the time is that he moves on, they'd like to think that Spencer Johnson could be that big, daunting left arm quick. But yeah, just keen for your threshold thoughts on who might be the Australian T20 captain, given that Mitchell Marsh will be not about readying himself for the Test series. Like, who of that lot do you think ends up with the armband on when they play Pakistan in the short form stuff?
My heart says it would be great to see Glenn Maxwell be captain just for this one series. Like, when you think
Mm,
T20 cricket, like just globally, just the history of T20 cricket, uh, I'd be surprised if Maxwell doesn't prop up in your top five, not top three of the greatest to have played that format. And for him to
mm,
get a chance after everything he's been through in his career, and people are reading more and learning more about him as we speak through the wonderful book you've done with him. It would be like almost a nod to Glenn Maxwell, right? Just a three-match
mm,
bilateral series. You're sort of in a World Cup cycle, but the World Cup is still 18 months away. It would be nice. I mean, I would personally love for that to happen. However, I mean, George Bailey did kind of indicate that even with the decision around the captain, they will be looking at the future. But I mean, even if you look at the future, I mean, you probably Maxwell should be around in 2026. I think that would be a great way for him to end his career in India in that T20 World Cup. But you could still give it to him, and kind of,
mhm,
even if it's not like um, a role you give him so that he continues and maybe even captains Australia in that World Cup. It's good to have him as a backup if he is going to be part of the squad. But apart from that, I don't think there are many wrong options. I mean, they can go the Adam Zampa route. He's captain in the BBL. Marcus Stoinis, I would be surprised if at this stage of his career they give it to him. I was reading somewhere that even Matt Shott could be a candidate. I mean, he's made a good start to his
mhm.
T20I career, but I think it came from a very biased Victorian voice, so we'll leave it at that. So um, I think, I think I have a feeling they might go the Zampa route. Though, like I said, Maxwell would be my pick.
Yeah, I suppose Josh Inglis would be the other one if they're looking to
Mm,
future proof, if you like, and thinking beyond when I suppose Pat Cummins and Mitchell Marsh necessarily. I mean, I know Cummins will do the role at Test level for much longer, but whether he's still doing it in the white ball teams, that's a different kind of question when they start to try and look after Cummins' body, which
mm.
we're not a million miles away from that, are we? That they'll reach a tipping point when they're going to want to look after Cummins, given that Test cricket will be his priority. Speaking of careers coming to an end, Matthew Wade. This was formally announced alongside the T20 squad that his international journey is over. A lot of admiration for Matt Wade about the way he got himself back into that Test team in 2019. He did it the hard way, through Sheffield Shield runs. He was jettisoned in 2017. There was the suggestion that his wicket keeping wasn't good enough at Test level. Following the tour to Bangladesh in 2017, so he's like, okay, if that's the call, I'm going to make myself. I'm going to make myself a genuine top six option. And those 200s in England, Edgbaston was crucial to putting Australia in such a strong position that they're able to win that match on the final day. And then 100 against Jofra Archer at the Oval, which I know they lost that match, but he was brilliant on that
Mm.
occasion too. The World Cup win in 2021 simply could not have happened without Matthew Wade in that semi-final, the 43 not out. The enterprising way that he went about it against Pakistan when almost all looked lost. Um, a really interesting part of the Maxi book actually was him saying that when Matthew Wade rocked up from the Aussie A squad before the World Cup semi in
Mm.
2019, where Maxi was going through a depressive episode, which is a sad part of the book, but an interesting reflection was that Matthew Wade was the best player in the country at that point, and
Mm.
it's a shame that they weren't able to thread the needle on Wade's involvement in that tournament until it was too late. But yeah, other parts to this as well that it shouldn't be underestimated just how close Matthew Wade was to Philip Hughes and the effect that
Mm.
that would have had clearly on his career, given they were such close friends, and how he came back from that and made himself like an excellent Australian cricketer. As Dan Cherney pointed out on social media as well, he's also a cancer survivor,
Mm.
remembering that he went through a couple of rounds of chemotherapy as a 16-year-old. So all of what Wade's achieved from a career which promised an awful lot at the start as a test player, making a century in the Caribbean on his first Australian trip, an excellent 100 against Sri Lanka in early 2013 as well, which I remember fondly being there for. Across the three formats, he's done an awful lot right, and I'm glad he's getting recognised as a really important player of the last 10 or 12 years.
And the ultimate team man. We spoke earlier about Marcus Harris, and I just wanted to say on that, like, see, my sources say that they, the selectors are still not very sure of who the opener is. Like, I think it's Nathan McSweeney. There are lots of other people with other options, but the selectors are pretty clear that they're not really making it up. They really are not sure, and they're going to wait for another couple
Mm.
of weeks before they announce it. And I just thought of that. But you spoke of Marcus Harris, Adam, and the runs he scored, and the fact that he might still end up missing out once again for that opening slot. But whether you're Marcus Harris or a young cricketer in this country, or a seasoned cricketer in this country, or anywhere in the world, I think you can learn a lot from Matthew Wade's career. The fact that he's been able to
Mm.
reinvent himself over and over again. You spoke about Test cricket, so he gets dropped for his keeping. He goes and just scores so many runs that you just can't leave him out. And he forces his way back into the side while Tim Payne is already captaining and keeping, and becomes is picked purely as a middle order batter. And then for me, I think the legacy of Matthew Wade will be when he finally had found his niche in Test cricket at number 6, the 200s in the Ashes in 2019, averaging 38. Not to forget that battle against Neil Wagner, which we will never forget,
Yeah.
where he just kept like fronting up. It felt like a boxing match almost when he was facing Wagner. And then the next season, when India came, COVID, David Warner gets injured. Australia desperately needed an opener. Joe Burns is out of form at the other end. He puts his hand up and literally sacrificed his Test career. And he played
Yeah.
all 4 of those tests, and that was it. He never played Test cricket again. To go from having peaked as a Test cricketer to kind of accept this very difficult role of opening the batting and then losing it all, I think it's a great lesson. You can keep doing that, and he did the same in T20 cricket, didn't he? Like for a while, he was a fixture in the white ball side, and then he lost that as well. I mean, the others started coming in, like Alex Carey, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to really specialize at number 7 and make that position my own." And it came to the fore when Australia needed it the most in that famous semi-final you mentioned against Pakistan, and then from nowhere he gets an IPL deal for the first time in over 10 years. And he was
Mm.
there with the Gujarat Titans when they won the first IPL in their first season. I don't think he played in the final. So it is a great story of reinvention and kind of just finding a way, not giving up. And I think that's something any young cricketer or anyone in life can learn from Matthew Wade.
Yeah, resilience, absolutely. Well played, Matthew Wade. It wasn't the only media release we received from Cricket Australia this week, by the way, about Matthew Wade's international retirement. There was the David Warner leadership ban lifted release, which, it all seems fairly logical to me. To be honest with you, it all felt pretty logical to me 18 months ago as well when we were in Adelaide and this blew up. When I suppose around that time it was whether Warner might come back and lead the Aussie white ball teams plural,
Yeah.
with an eye to the 2013 World Cup. And there was like, well, who's going to do the job and all the rest of it. And they knocked it on the head then, but they've seen fit through the panel, the conduct commission, the official process, the unanimous decision they made there, the 3-person panel on review that he met the criteria. And look, whatever the criteria was about contrition and all the rest that they referred to, I just felt like, he's basically served the ban, to my way of thinking.
Yeah.
What the ban really was David Warner isn't going to captain Australia, and his Australian career is emphatically finished. If you wanted any further confirmation of that, the aforementioned Cummins interview on Grade Cricketer last week when he made that joke that, have a nice season with the Thunder, which was a great line from Cummins. But look, Warner, who does now get the chance to lead at domestic level, and what that really means is he'll help bring eyeballs to the Big Bash this season, when in all probability having the chance from time to time, I guess, leading the Sydney Thunder. And if that means it can elevate that competition a little bit on the way through, seems like zero downside to me. There'll be no risk of, well, there's no world where, there's no scenario where he leads Australia anyway. He's essentially served the ban that was intended back in 2018. And now we can move on with this correction being made right at the end of his journey.
And he can live out the rest of his life without that. I wouldn't say regret, but just that albatross around his neck, right? Like that, he finished his playing career with a ban, like with a leadership ban. And even though we both seen a lot of David Warner over the years, and I don't think he would have let it show, but I'm sure it would have been there somewhere in his mind if it hadn't been lifted at some point. So, and again, I spoke earlier about Glenn Maxwell getting to captain an Australian team on home soil. For David Warner to just be able to show his captaincy skills off on home soil, whether it's just for one season with the Thunder or if he gets another season in the BBL next year as well. I think it's deserving. We've seen in the IPL how much or how good he is as a captain, as a strategic captain in T20 cricket, and I mean, maybe a great, potentially great captain that Australia missed out on for a number of reasons. And like I've always said, I mean, the overreaction to what happened in Cape Town, watching on from outside, I was still in India when it happened. We all still haven't got our head around why it was turned into such a big deal. But I get it now, having lived in Australia for many years, about how cricketers and the moral standards that that they are subject to, as compared to athletes in other sporting codes. You know how much of a bugbear that's been for me when that happens with cricketers. But anyway, it's good that he gets to captain on the side. But just going through the press release as well, I was also very interested in this bit which said his important continuing role in fostering interest in cricket, especially with the South Asian community in Australia and generally, which is actually a very good point, because he has probably become the most popular Australian cricketer for Indians in India, but also the South Asian diaspora, and he manages that aspect of his life really well. And at a time when Cricket Australia is very, very consciously working on inclusivity, and especially in terms of the South Asian community. And this is not me speaking as a multicultural ambassador, but just as someone who's watched David Warner form those connects with India. I think that's a good point as well. So I'm glad they made it. But yeah, and it will bring more eyeballs to the BBL. And it's David Warner. He's going to create a lot of news. Now that you've given him the platform, he'll make sure everybody has eyeballs at the BBL. That's the beauty of him.
Yeah, that is absolutely certain. Baz, what I might do here, I said at the top of the show we might get a voice note from Geoff telling us what he's up to. Well, I'm reliably informed by Tubes in our little chat we've got going here that Geoff is going to send a voice note through. So why don't we end segment 2 with a dispatch from the election campaign. Geoff's been writing daily about what he's seeing in the States. He's been at rallies. He's been doing other things, which he'll tell you about in a moment. So here's Geoff Lemon from the road in the States. And when we come back from the next break, we'll go into it, a break after that.
Yeah, it's not the final word. It's some of the other words. Hi, everybody. Geoff coming to you from Washington, D.C., where it's a beautiful morning. Sorry that I haven't been on the show the last couple of weeks. Been a bit busy racing around, following some of the US election trail and some other stories besides. So I've been all over. I went all through Pennsylvania to begin with, and then drove all the way up to Minnesota, Tim Walz country, and came back down through Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, so all of that sort of swing state territory. Met a bunch of interesting people along the way there. Went to Ohio, to Springfield, which you keep hearing about in various people's speeches through this campaign. So there'll be a story on that coming up very shortly. And then went down to North Carolina to a Republican stronghold in what is sort of kind of maybe a swing state if you squint at it, or at least that's some of the speculation. And then it's been a pretty big last few days. Did an 8-hour overnight drive from there up to New York City to get to the Donald Trump event at Madison Square Garden, which was an extraordinary spectacle in its own way. So I've written about that extensively, and then drove back to DC to go and see Kamala Harris, essentially giving a reply at the National Mall, the park right outside of the White House where Trump gave his speech in 2021 that set off the January 6th riot at the Capitol. So yeah, there's been an awful lot going on. I've been doing a bunch of writing about that, so if you want to follow along with that, there's a spin-off Patreon at patreon.com/Geoff Lemon. That's free to read. You can chip in if you want to. There's a bunch of people who are following along there, so it'll be good to have you. And yeah, another week or so of this, just under a week until Election Day, and then a couple of days to see what the aftermath is before I head back to Cricketland, where I'll see you on the show. So thanks to Adam for his patience with me being away, and I'll look forward to seeing some of you on the internet regardless.